And then how do you think the outcome of the presidential election in the US is going to affect our regulatory roadmap ahead?
Yeah. So, I think it's going to have a few things. I think we will see positive stablecoin regulation coming down. And I think we have some of the largest crypto companies in the United States, all of whom want to see things move forward positively here. I think it'll be positive for markets overall and definitely for crypto markets. We broke the Bitcoin all-time high last night. So
that we did. Today's guest is Polygon's Chief Legal and Policy Officer, Rebecca Rettig. Rebecca has testified before Congress on the importance of DeFi and regulating the industry thoughtfully. She has helped shape and navigate the policy and regulatory landscape in crypto, and is just overall a very amazing person that I've known for some time. So I'm really excited to have her on. Rebecca, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. To start off, for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you even got into this space as a lawyer? And I'm hoping you don't regret it because I'm sure you're very busy.
I definitely don't regret it. It's been a long sort of 7.5, 8 years, and definitely feels very different today than I think in the whole time I've been in crypto before. But I am, as you said, the Chief Legal and Policy Officer at Polygon Labs, so international software development company that's building out all sorts of new blockchain networks and contributing to the space in many ways. But I've been in this space, as you alluded to, for a long time. I've been a lawyer for many, many years, and sort of halfway into my legal career, decided to pivot into crypto. I got into crypto probably 4 years before I made the career change, just by reading about it. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, like buried in the back in 2013, about Bitcoin and Mt. Gox, and had one of those aha moments, like, oh, there are going to be a lot of legal issues around this.
You're reading the article, like there are problems to come, right? Yeah.
And then decided about 3.5, 4 years later to just really dedicate my career to it. And it coincided with the rise of ICOs and all of those types of things. But I've done a lot of work, and my most favorite work representing software developers throughout the space and coming up with sort of novel and creative solutions to these legal and regulatory problems, since, very round peg, square hole, square peg, round hole kind of thing.
It's one or the other. It flips. Yeah. We could do that for sure. So before crypto, what were you a lawyer? Like, what was the industry sector that you were lawyering?
Yes. So I was at a big New York law firm, just doing litigation and regulatory enforcement work, mostly for like Fortune 500 companies, through all different things. I would say the most relevant experience I had when I was a regular lawyer is I worked on one of the very early peer-to-peer file sharing cases. And so you did have these novel technological issues, but those were mostly around like copyright and less around things like securities or commodities law. But it was really about how do you look at these laws that looked at usual, typical, like people interfacing kinds of tech, and where you had not. So it was interesting, and it's applicable here.
Right. And you've been in the space for a while now, and I'm curious to hear how you kind of navigate the legal and policy side of crypto and how that has changed from day one. I imagine it's been a very big change all the way up to where we are today. And we'll get into the election and everything, but how do you kind of navigate the legal and policy side of things over the years?
Yeah. So just on the legal side, and so just to distinguish for listeners, like legal is like, what is the law today? And policy is what should the law be in the future? And so when you deal with what is the law today, 7.5, 8 years ago, it was actually pretty clear. And the questions around the technology were not as complex as they are today, because we were really early back then, right? You just had ICOs and you were launching some applications and launching some blockchain networks, but things were not as complex back then. So you had sort of a few bodies of law, not as many that you were looking at. I would say now it's much, much more complex, and you are really informed by what are the goals of the law and how are we going to be a good actor in the space versus like, okay, is there a black letter law that really applies here? So I would say it got more complex over time because the technology's gotten more complex, and there's just been a lot of murkiness along the way. So
yeah, we've definitely seen that in the past few years with the SEC, the CFTC, all the acronyms getting involved there. On the policy front, how do you look at it? Like, I know you testified before Congress on DeFi related topics, but what do you think is the best foot forward? Obviously, we want clear regulation and hopefully neutral and or good regulation towards the industry so innovation can flourish. But from your perspective, how do you discuss that in front of Congress and just in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it goes to sort of how the question you asked about the legal side of things, like what did you think back in the day and how does it compare to now? We weren't even really thinking about policy in the same way, right? When we were all these lawyers were sort of getting into it. We just were trying to look at where things were at that particular time. And now it's really forward looking, like everyone sees how novel and different this is. And so you do have to come up with creative regulatory solutions because you can't just pigeonhole. And as I said in my congressional testimony, like you cannot map one-to-one traditional laws onto these intermediary-less systems. And I think that the most important parts are understanding what the law really is and the purpose behind it and understanding what the tech really does. And I will say that I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding about what the tech does or how it works. And that may have misinformed policy ideas that have been put forward, not by the industry, but just generally that we've seen out there. And so I'm actually very hopeful that this industry really has come together over the last year and a half in a very coordinated way and with a lot of people who really care about getting it right. And so I'm pretty excited to see what happens.
What do you think they are misinformed on the most?
I think there are a few different parts. I mean, just the different pieces of the technology and how it all fits together. What decentralization really means or is. It's much more of an operational resilience question than it is a legal question. And, who owns what or who operates what in the system for sure.
Yeah. And how do you kind of expect DeFi to be regulated going forward? And what do you think would be maybe the wrong way to go about it and then the right way? I mean, I've seen the zeitgeist and conversations on crypto Twitter about what's been happening has been the wrong way. And listeners can agree or disagree. I feel pretty strongly about it as well. But what do you think correct regulatory framework looks like to you and that you're advocating for?
So I'll do the lawyer thing and reframe the question a little bit.
Go ahead. You're the guest. You could have fun.
Correct regulatory framework is hard because I would say most of our traditional regulations today are seeking to meet policy goals. Whether they are correct in doing it well, is up for debate. I would say lots of people who have to comply with Dodd-Frank would say it's not correct, but they are working towards meeting those goals. But in all seriousness, for DeFi, I mean, as I said during my testimony, like that's not just a sliver of the crypto world. It's like a real small amount of even global GDP. And so what people are so concerned about right now seems a bit overblown. It's one of the most interesting developments in the crypto space since the advent of Bitcoin. And so I think it needs to be protected in a number of ways. Internationally, there's no DeFi regulation, and there's just been a lot of studies. And I think the proposed legislation we've seen in the United States is along the same lines, and we shouldn't do more yet. Yeah, we'll talk about the global side of things in a little bit, but we are recording this on Wednesday, November 6, 2024. Donald Trump was elected as president, I believe 47th president. Fact check on that. I think I'm correct. But looking at the U.S. presidential election, what impact do you expect Trump's win to have on policy being made in crypto? I think that it is going to have an outsized effect. I think the industry was not just crypto, but tech was such a strong voice during his campaign. And he has a lot of tech people, both in his transition and true like industry, both crypto and just finance and like actual people who have been working in business for a long time, that I think his administration is going to look very different. He's made very, very clear promises that you can sort of check off a list from his Bitcoin Nashville speech. And I think he will stick to that very early on. So I think this is going to I think crypto took this election as existential for its future. and acted accordingly. And I think that's paid off. Took a lot of risk. But I do think we're going to see a very different regulatory approach. I think there will be a cessation, if not a deep lessening of regulation by enforcement. I think there will be new rulemaking informed by people in industry who may actually be interested in going into the government. So I think it's going to be the biggest change we've really seen.
Yeah, that's huge. And on his checklist, I remember from Bitcoin Nashville, if you know where I'm going with this, one of the things was on day one, it is to fire the SEC chair, Gary Gansler. What do you see this election playing in resetting or changing the structure of the SEC and its attitude maybe towards the crypto industry?
Yeah. So I think we all shouldn't get ahead of ourselves because it's November 6th and we have till January.
We've got time.
But
we got 2 months. Yeah.
Yes, but it's really important because I do think if Harris had won, Gensler may have taken a different approach to say, let's see who comes in next and maybe I won't go. So, go out guns blazing. But I may be wrong and I hope I am, but I do think see aggressive action from the SEC
before he's out.
For the next couple months. And then I think Trump will not put someone in the SEC who would even remotely have that approach. I think there will be collaborative rulemaking. And I think the biggest challenge will be figuring out how to roll back or put a moratorium or stay on some of the currently pending cases, the come in and register cases when there's actually no registration path forward. So I think we're going to have somebody much more, maybe even if the person's not friendly to industry, they are not going to be affirmatively harmful in going after the industry.
Do you think that Gary Gansler was definitely putting a target on the crypto industry?
Unquestionably.
Right. And then
I will say when I've spoken to lawyers who are traditional SEC lawyers and may not have ever had exposure to crypto and who are then brought into crypto cases, their response back is, why is X, Y, and Z happening? We don't see this in non-crypto cases. And so you really have to say to people like, nope, it's just crypto. Like things work differently there. Even what we saw last week with respect to Immutable, where the first reach out was a Wells response, that is highly atypical. And the theories are very far afield that we've seen. The level of aggression is very far afield. And the lengths that they'll go to win at all costs are really, really different. Now, look, he's been aggressive against other industries as well since he's been in office. I'm not sure, the guys on Wall Street will necessarily be welcoming Gary in with open arms too. But there has been a huge target on crypto's back, unquestionably.
Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it was political. I think that the last 4 years felt very, tech resistant in many ways. And crypto's origins, whether people remember it or not, are really anti-government and removing the middleman, removing that kind of stuff. And so I think there is a feeling that I think a subconscious feeling in many regulators, and we're talking globally, or policymakers, that if you remove state-backed fiat currency, then you remove a lot of government power. And they felt like this could get away. And it wasn't something that, whether it be Senator Warren or Gansler or that whole entire cohort, like there was an attempt for an anti-crypto army. And this is where we are now.
And it's pretty pro-crypto now, right?
Well, I think there are a lot of pro-crypto people. I think the other interesting thing is I just think it's very clear crypto's here to stay. So I just don't think it's a hot button issue anymore because it's clearly not worth it. Like we also saw what happened when you are a very staunch, staunchly anti-crypto, right? We saw what happened in the Ohio Senate race. And I think people think like, this is not an issue that's worth taking on and losing my seat over. So. Right.
I saw some conversations out there that this is like a good thing that it was made partisan. And then I remember a few months back that people were like, this should be a nonpartisan issue. And I was of the camp that it should be nonpartisan. I'm curious, what was your perspective on it as well? Especially now that we now have like a pro-Bitcoin, pro-crypto president coming into office in January. Do you think it makes sense that it's a partisan thing or nonpartisan?
It actually, I would say if you really look at who Fairshake, which is the big crypto pack, supported, it wasn't partisan. They supported Democrats as well. And I think we just saw everybody re-up a lot of their donations to Fairshake for 2026 or 2025, 2026 going into the midterms. And so I think it is not going to be worth it for anyone in any party to take on crypto. I think it seemed partisan, but there were plenty of pro-crypto Democratic candidates at the House and Senate levels who got crypto support and who have been good advocates for a long time. So I think in some ways, maybe, but look, even so, maybe a few weeks ago, right? Like not early in the campaign, and probably a little too late. Even Harris was saying, I'll support innovative technologies like digital assets and AI. So she said it maybe 2 or 3 times, obviously not enough. But I think by the end of the campaign, people understood like this can't be a partisan issue. And I think that's where we are today.
And then how do you think the outcome of the presidential election in the US is going to affect our regulatory roadmap ahead? I say ours because I know we're both based in the US, but then I mean like the whole industry.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's going to have a few things. I think we will see positive stablecoin regulation coming down. Senator Hagerty has been very instrumental in advising and working with President Trump on crypto policy and has a great draft out there on a stablecoin bill. And so I think even if we don't see the lame duck, we have a really good example of stablecoin bills out there that will move forward, that will put us very much in line, if not ahead of the rest of the world. And I think we have some of the largest crypto companies in the United States, all of whom want to see things move forward positively here. I don't think we will necessarily see a rush to market structure legislation in a new Trump administration. I think we may take some time, or there may be some rulemaking around that. Unclear. But I think we'll be moving forward in a positive path. And, I think it'll be positive for markets overall and definitely for crypto markets. I mean, we broke the Bitcoin all-time high last night. So
that we did. Everyone else, not me. I didn't touch anything. I just watched. You said market structure. What do you mean by that in terms of market structure policy?
Yeah. Great question. So stablecoins will just look at who is in charge of stablecoins? Will it be federally regulated, state regulated, that kind of thing? And it will resolve a lot of those issues, let people move forward productively. Market structure is something like what we've seen with Fit 21 or the draft bill from Senator Stabenow called the Digital Commodities Act, the DCA, which is really looking to think about how these centralized actors, so exchanges, OTC desks, custodians, will actually have these registration regimes. Because in the United States right now, we do not have a registration regime for what's called spot market commodities. So the CFTC, while they say that all crypto is a commodity, they don't have, like if you're just trading corn, just as corn, which is another commodity, they don't have the jurisdiction just over spot market. If you're trading like something called futures or derivatives, then they do. And so we need something to regulate, people believe we need something to regulate exchanges or the centralized actors where this crypto is trading. So that's the market structure we're really talking about. And this question, to resolve this question once and for all, are these commodities or securities or what are they? So,
yeah. I wanted to go back or circle back to something we talked about in the beginning was global policies. Obviously, Polygon Labs is a global company. When it comes to the current state of policies in crypto, which countries do you think are getting it right or at least on the right path? And maybe that could be something that the US learns from.
Yeah, I mean, look, for sure, kudos to the EU for putting something super comprehensive in place. It's narrow and it is not as crypto friendly, I think, as everyone always thought it was going to be. And, I'm not sure it gives us all the regulatory clarity we thought it would. Just even looking at it now and talking to other lawyers in the space, it's unclear if it captures this kind of tech or that kind of tech. But like definitely good for them for putting something out there. I think what's really interesting is when you look at something like the framework in Abu Dhabi, which is to encourage foundations set up there and for positive disclosure around tokens that are launched out of foundations there. Like that's a great approach, right? That is tackling something important in the industry, disclosures around tokens, narrow. They have thought through like, you should have audits be public. You should have, like, they've thought through it in a really tech appropriate way. And it's not tech neutral, right? It is specific to the tokens, but it's about what do we want to know and what are the disclosures around it. So I think they're doing a great job. Singapore's been thinking about things for a long time. And the UK, I think, has done a lot of work in trying to put something together. I think they've sort of halted where they are in many ways with the changeover of the government. But there's been a lot of engagement around the world in a way that we've only seen in the US in the last, let's say, 3 years, maybe.
I know you're a lawyer, so this is not legal advice for anyone listening. This whole episode is not legal advice. She's not your lawyer. She's just a guest, a great guest at that. But I'm curious, what do you think are the opportunities or risks for crypto companies today? Like, let's say you were to make up one, where would you maybe want to launch it and also definitely not want to launch it?
Today,
be your advice. I don't want to say advice. It's not advice. Like
just weighing pros and cons. It's like business people thinking about what's good for crypto. And honestly, founders in this space, forget being a lawyer, founders in this space have had to go through this analysis like themselves many years. And talking on November 6th, really different than talking on November 4th or 5th. Just given what we know. Like, I mean, it depends. Do you want to launch a token? But if you just want to build an app and you're not launching a token tomorrow, I think you can set up in the US. Really different, obviously. But I think this is a really positive change for economic growth in the United States through crypto and tech in general. We don't have a comprehensive regulatory scheme, but in some ways that benefits the industry for people who really want to build serious businesses, and hopefully can help craft positive regulation as we move forward. I think setting up in the EU, depending on what you're building, if you're just building like something in DeFi, Web3 app or DApp or something like that, EU is totally fine to do that. But if you're setting up like some sort of regulated stablecoin, I think EU is really, really hard. So I'll give the lawyer answer. It depends. But I do think it's very different today than it was even yesterday or 2 days ago.
What if I have a token made up? I do not have a token. And I want to do it in the US. You would advise against it. Do you think it would ever become token friendly here? Yeah,
it will. It really will. And one of the things I had been hoping that we could start thinking about and just had never put out an article or found anybody to be able to do it with because, the US was the US is Cayman has a booming foundation business, right? And they know this just as well as I do. Like there's an entire industry that's been built up, directors and all these service providers. And it's really become like a strong part of their economy. We have a 501c3, right? Like these nonprofit entities that you can start in the United States. And one of the things in it is it promoting scientific or technological development? And so you can do this if you really want to continue on with this foundation or nonprofit structure. You can do foundations or nonprofits in the United States. And that really may be something that starts to come into more common practice as we see the market structure and the regulation around crypto get built up in the US.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up before that like our conversation would have been very different if we talked like 2 or 3 days before. And it's true. That's why we're recording this literally before we put it out in about 18 hours. But what challenges still exist today? Because I feel like this is a pretty optimistic episode. We're feeling good. Day one. It's not even day one. We still got 2 months to day one. But what do you think are the biggest challenges still that are going to be facing the industry? Because not everything could be rainbow and sunshine.
It is, well, for sure in crypto, we get
we get ups and downs,
Yeah, like you get rainbow and sunshine for like a year or two.
Exactly.
And then, we're brought back to earth very, very quickly. So I'm going to enjoy my day of sunshine.
Exactly,
figure out all the fire drills that are next. But in all seriousness, look, the lack of regulatory clarity has been the worst for the industry, not because it's caused people to spend money on lawyers and maybe have to go offshore. Those are all bad things. But it has also attracted people that were not serious about building out what this industry can really be and what this tech can really be, right? You just saw people doing a lot of like either rug pulls or just those kinds of scammy types of things. And so in a situation where people feel very bullish about crypto and there is not a clear regulatory path forward, you may not sort of weed out the wheat from the chaff or get rid of some of those scams as fast as we need to. So there is a challenge in balancing out sort of the euphoria around the markets and how exciting it is to, as you said, to have a pro-Bitcoin, pro-crypto candidate or pro-crypto president coming into office, with the need to really bring about some discipline into the space to really build it out for what it can be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point too, is like, we're not just going to let everything be a free for all and like everyone goes running crazy, to your point, but it also will be hopefully done in a thoughtful way. What do you think is the timeline for that? Because these things don't happen overnight. The government works way slower than a startup ever would. I remember when the first, not first, but one of the big stablecoin bills was introduced a few years ago. People are like, oh, we're hoping for it by the beginning of 2022 or 2023. And here I am, starting to get wrinkles and it hasn't happened, So what do you think is the timeline, a realistic timeline of when we will get these guidelines and frameworks?
Yeah. So stablecoins will probably get in 2025, maybe first quarter.
I'm going to hold you to that. No,
I think it'll be hard to, it will be hard pressed not to do stablecoins in 2025. There's general consensus around it, and it will be net positive for the US and the economy and for the strength of the US dollar. Right. I think that's really important. And there have been tons of articles about this, but the strength of the US dollar and having US stablecoins be properly regulated is also really important for national security. And a lot of good when we're thinking about all these questions about sanctions and illicit finance, stablecoins are actually a cornerstone in combating a lot of the bad actors in the space or who use crypto. So I think stablecoin regulation in 2025, you should hold me to that. I mean,
we'll talk about it in 2025. Yeah. I'll have you back on.
Okay, sounds good. So I think that we'll see it there. I think, the question about market structure and where you register and things like that, that may not be a 2025 issue. That may take 18 months to 2 years, because I think there's going to have to be a balance between thinking about whether we want to write rules versus whether we need new legislation. I think the thing that's also really positive, that's been talked a lot about publicly, is that Trump is, considering putting together a crypto council of industry players, law enforcement, and things like that. That'll be really positive for the space, and I think if they set it up well, and it will be, within the purview of the White House, then you'll have a lot of recommendations coming out of there, and so that may slow down this idea of this market structure type of bill. Are
you getting invited into that? You hearing conversations about that?
I don't know. We'll see. I hope so.
All right. Well, that would be good. Okay. Looking to 2025, what do you think we could look forward to based off everything that we've talked about, near-term outcomes?
I think taking a deep breath, right? I think regulatory inbound I'm talking about from the legal regulatory perspective. But I'll talk about the business side too a little bit. From the legal and regulatory perspective, taking a deep breath, right? Regulatory inbound has been part of the cost of doing business. And it's still, even if you're expecting it still causes a lot of stress, a lot of distraction from day to day unnecessarily, and distraction from just building. And so I think when you take that out a little bit, you have a lot more freedom around building and focusing on just, are you really building a successful, necessary product, right? Startups are thinking, am I meeting a need? Right. And so we can focus on doing that, all of us in the industry, than anything else. So I am looking forward to building really useful tools.
Yeah. That reminds me of, do you know MC Ladder from Uniswap Labs? She once said to me, I was like, well, how do you kind of talk to startups on whether or not they should be worried? She's like, if you could go before a judge and explain why your company has a use case and it's not malicious, then you should not be worried at all. But if you feel you can't do that, don't create it, Yeah.
Yeah. I just sort of wrote an op-ed on this as it relates to tokens, which is make your tokens useful and make them fair. And if you've done that, right, and you'll be happy with how it's portrayed on the cover of, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, then you're good to go. And that's what I think about too, when you asked about how do you advise companies even back in the day. A lot of it was, if you ever got called, could you say, look, the law isn't perfect, but we were a good actor. Like, yeah.
Exactly. 100%. What else are you watching right now that you think other people should pay attention to that we have not talked about?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there are a lot of exciting things that are going to be built now. As I said, I think we can just have builders be builders. I think the idea of coming up with some creative regulatory solutions in this new administration will be great. Mostly, I'm just looking forward to sort of working with a little bit of a lighter weight off my shoulders and doing more good in the space to move it forward. So
I hope you get a vacation or get to enjoy the holidays coming up.
That I will do. That I definitely
100%. Yeah. There we go.
What you see so many sides of the industry. What are you looking forward to?
I mean, it's funny because when I was a reporter, I felt like I somehow became like a legal regulatory reporter towards the end of my days when I was at TechCrunch. So I'm excited to see exactly what we've been talking about, just like more clear frameworks and guidelines on that front. And then I also see a lot of fun developments on the gaming side. I think that's like a no-brainer entry point for people to get into this industry without even knowing they're in it. Poly Market, which is built on Polygon, is a easy winner from the election. We didn't even get a chance to talk about that, but it was all over my feed. They called the election before all the TVs did. Like I was watching, the mainstream media and like they're just going back and forth, making conversation, not calling anything. And then meanwhile, it's like 70%, 80%, 90% on Polygon of a chance of like Trump winning. And so, I mean, I think the future of mainstream media is kind of dying, and that blockchain technology and what can be created with it is a really powerful aspect. So, yeah. I
agree. And like, just to go on to this Poly Market point, the most amazing point, right, is it abstracted away the blockchain element, right? Like nobody's talking about it as a crypto app. And you heard about it everywhere, right? It's just showing real sentiment. And I do think the interesting thing is people have been talking about intermediaries intervening, whether it be to, be a true middleman in finance or be a true middleman with respect to like taking people's data. But ultimately, when you think about the mainstream media, you have opinions and biases as a middleman there in terms of what comes through between facts, how it's interpreted and sent to you. And so the information on Poly Market doesn't have that middleman of bias. Now, obviously, you have to think about who's trading and things like that. And it was, Poly Market's all outside the US. But I think for all of these types of prediction markets, we're going to see a lot of interesting use cases from them. And yes, people have been obsessed around the election for a long time in terms of prediction markets over their history. But I think that given where the world is going today, people want to take bets on,
everything.
Like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce getting married this year kind of stuff.
Right.
And that's like, I think of those kinds of markets as the future of TikTok. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think Poly Market is a good call out on that.
Yeah, 100%. Put your money where your mouth is, people. Aside from the election, other things, of course.
That's right.
Last major thing, Rebecca, always love to ask my guests this, and I'll preface it because you are a lawyer. It's not legal advice, but can you leave us with a piece of advice, something that you've carried with you throughout your time in this industry?
Oh, yeah. Trust your gut on all of this stuff, whether it's with the people you work with or what they're building or how you conduct yourself or the decisions you make. But trust your gut. You get a lot of information coming at you in crypto. And if you're true to yourself, you know that you've built something really positive.
Love that. Absolutely agree. Thank you so much for coming on today, Rebecca. Enjoyed this. And we'll talk again 2025 or sooner.
Yeah, 2025. Exactly. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on.